Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Choan Sensei, for your invitation and for your reciprocation of coming up to Long Beach occasionally. We schedule another date for you if we could. That would be great. Wow, this is I think this is the most number of people I've um, seen here since in the times that I've been here. Not that there aren't lots of people here when I'm not here, which is not very often. But always wanted to be back in San Diego. Had the privilege of living down here for 3 years many years ago, and I know San Diego's this place of perpetual spring. Uh, at the time, I was working for Kaiser, and I did um, uh, discrimination investigations, and I had like the Kaiser hospitals that are along the 15 corridor. I had Fontana, Riverside, and San Diego that I did investigations. So it was interesting that Fontana had all the racial discrimination cases, and San Diego had all the sexual discrimination cases. So what does that tell you about San Diego? We're not. So it has been quite a week, yes. Uh, Definitely been a challenge for my practice, and had a wonderful conversation with Choa Sensei yesterday, in which he told me that you are scheduled to have a very honored guest, the author of the book. Quick name of the book: "Home is Here: Skillful Enactment, Wholeness with the Interbeing Contract." And I guess she's her premise is anti-racism, so which is with using the Buddhist principles of the Four Noble Truths. So if that's going to be on Zoom, I would love to attend that if I could. And I did have the opportunity to. I quickly downloaded her book on Audible and was listening to it. Of course, I did not get all the way through it, so I just had a few notes that I thought that were pertinent today. But I just wanted to, dive into the heart of this practice. How do we use this practice to deal with everyday life? And everyday life included, the killing of Mr. Kirk this past week. This had an amazing impact. I had no idea who he was until the shooting. I'd not heard of him. I guess he's well known in certain circles and well known for his rather extreme positions. Um, and as a Zen practitioner, it calls into question, or it could be a challenge for our practice. So I wanted to kind of, you know, dive into this difficult subject of how do we deal with racism. This Buddhism in America is predominantly white, and there have been many attempts to, shift that emphasis. Um, and in some places it's more successful than others. I got many years ago I got a call from another Dharma successor, Maizumi Roshi. He had a place out in Santa Monica in LA, West Side, lots of money. He had lots of very wealthy people who sat with him, and he called me, and he is a self-admitted Southern white trash boy, as he describes himself to me. And I tell him, please don't describe yourself that much. But that's how he called himself. And he calls me one day, and he says, Wayu, why don't I have any black people in my sangha? And I'm like, Yoshin, you're in Santa Monica. Not a lot of black people out there. So, and he's also extremely politically conservative. So the Dharma is not at all exclusive in that sense. So he's had some difficulty with some of the positions he's taken in some of his Dharma talks, and people have walked away not happy with him. And he knows this. He's been very honest with it. So we had this very uh, um, robust conversation. I'll put it that way. And he wanted to do more to integrate it. So I guess so we did this whole program about racism, and that time I don't know if anyone. I'm sure. I, I don't think he's dead. He's probably quite old right now. Lei Mun-Hua, at that time, was doing a lot of work, uh, anti-racism work in the United States Congress and in a lot of high-powered companies. And I had the privilege of doing some seminars with him and worked with him, directly. Great man for that. And he himself had to deal with that because his mother was murdered by an African American man and had to deal with the difficulty. And he's Chinese, um, to deal with that. And so notice that um, this book is also she's Vietnamese, born in Vietnam but immigrated here, so it comes from that Asian perspective. And so it's these perspectives are all important, and this wholeness, this oneness that we talk about in Zen, uh, is an important aspect to have as a ground base from which we come from to deal with this situation, because they're very different than from people who just want to get rid of it, because it's these positions, these particular points of view, are here and will always be here. A quote from uh, Martin Luther King. This is from his book, published in 1967. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community. And he says from this book, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Instead of diminishing evil, it multiplies it. Through violence, you may murder the liar, but you cannot murder the lie, nor establish the truth. Through violence, you murder the hater, but you do not murder hate. In fact, violence merely increases hate. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So, how do we do this? How do we work with this? So, I think I asked you to indulge me with a poem that I wrote the last time I was here. I'm going to ask that again. This time I wrote this during the first Trump administration. And because it occurred to me then that I needed this practice to deal with what he was bringing up then, and I think it's still out today. This is called The Noble Range. Originally I wrote this in 2019. I revised it. My revision date is 2022, so it's a few years old. To be and not to be. No longer a question nor a comparison, but now conjoined as a range of noble possibilities. It is only in the mind to suffer a little or a lot, or simply use that same mind to change the narrative to suffer not at all. The slings and arrows of outrage at fortunes stolen by oppressors' wrongs perpetuated by the law's delay. As for these arms we feel the need to take up against a sea of trouble, perhaps this requires a deeper examination. It is that these troubles only sound on the lying tongues of dualities unreal in nature, that is a vast and unlimited spectrum of diversity. Do we then end these lies of the many minds too narrow to fill a single skull by opposing them? Aye, there's the rub. Opposing only begets more murderous opposition, multiplying enemies with exponents. Are there perhaps other unreasoned, including unreasonable options in the range of possibilities? Perchance to dream the dream of a slain king who left us with a purpose as yet unrealized, because the realization is so simple, so easy that it is missed by those few who have stopped and held still long enough to breathe and know. A knowing so close, so intimate that it is impossible to form words, because knowing intimately is what happens before words. The millisecond difference between awareness and just another rerun of another hero's journey. So just be still, breathe, and know intimately that the only thing troubling the sea is you. If you stop struggling, you will float. Be still, breathe, and know intimately that the only thing that separates anything from anything else is a contrived falsehood, too thin to resist the flick of time, and the only requirement for its demise is that we stop repeating the lie. Be still, breathe, and know intimately that the single breath you breathe is taken from a single sky that surrounds a single earth, hanging in a single unified verse, and quietly and incessantly sings that we are inexorably, indissolubly, indivisibly, and undeniably the noble range of expressions, that which can never be separate. Be still, breathe, and know intimately that we are all this coalescence of all time and all space, right here, right now. We are one, we are love, we are gods. Thank you for the snaps. So, that's the subject. How do we use this oneness, this practice, to take care of our community as it is? Because as it is, it contains all of the amazing, talents and generosity and giving and loving and hatred, division, and chaos that comes with it. We are not separate from any of those things. It's a package deal. Yes, wouldn't it be wonderful to have this utopia in which we all just got along? But that has never existed. Um, and as far as I know, probably won't ever exist in the future. We will always have these differences. But these differences are what give us our, our diversity, our differences, our strength, and our weaknesses. Again, package deal. So it's not a matter of how do we get rid of it, it's how do we work with it? How do we go through this together? How do we take care of the community as it is, as it shows up in front of us? When we have, I had a very strongly positioned anti-vaxxer in my office several years ago. At that time, I was working for Kaiser. I feel privileged to now be retired and not doing that anymore. But I worked on the dark side of HR, so people came to my office when they were in trouble. So she was in trouble because Kaiser's position was get the vaccine. And she was a healthcare provider that did not want to give the vaccine. I'm not taking a position on vax or anti-vaccine, but we had the company line that needed to be abided by. And she was basically telling her patients, don't get the vaccine. So she's in my office, and I'm basically just wanting to get to know her, wanting to, who are you? Where are you coming from? Tell me why, how the story. Why are you telling the patients? At first, she was in, denial. Oh, I never said that. Blah blah blah. It was all this denial. And I said, well, I got 3 people who heard you say it, so maybe you want to rethink that answer. And I'm not here to. I don't make decisions about what happens to you. I'm here just to get the story. So let's just talk. So getting to understand that she had heard all kinds of things, all kinds of stories about vaccines, all this information, both good and bad, and somewhere in the receiving of all that information, she had made a decision about that. And I said, okay, you're welcome to believe anything you want to believe. However, what are you going to act out on when you're at work, when you're in this milieu, when you're dealing with our patients who are asking you for the vaccine? How are you going to address that? She wouldn't commit to anything, and I basically said, okay, because we have a policy here that you're not abiding by, I'm going to have to send you home. And then we're going to have to decide what we're going to do, because you're telling that you're not going to follow our policy. As simple as that. So this was not about a condemnation of her beliefs, not about that she was right or she was wrong, but just about I'm working in a milieu, in a surrounding, in a circumstances, in a policy-driven organization that says this is what we do. You're being paid by that organization, and you're not abiding by these rules. So we're going to question whether or not we're going to continue to pay you at this point. So these are just facts. These are just the circumstances in which this belief needed to be addressed. And certainly there are, and it needed not only to be addressed, but it needed to be called out. It needed to be paid attention to, because it had an impact on the people that were coming in for healthcare. So this is where I think the rubber hits the road. What are the circumstances that we are dealing with? We're not going to be able to change everybody's mind. We're not going to be able to have everybody not have some sort of divisive beliefs. That's simply not possible. So, and our practice is about dealing with reality and having it, effectively as possible. That's the question. What do we do? The vow that we take as Buddhists is to end suffering. And I love how do you pronounce her name, her last name? Shut. Yeah. She uses the basically she's the expert, and you're going to hear from her directly. So, but I do appreciate the fact that she uses the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as direction for how to address these things, because it is about ending suffering. How do we not do that? And the way that she's organized it is that it's cause and effect. So the effect is life is suffering. The cause is delusion, desire, all those things. So stop with the delusion and the desire, and you end suffering. Sounds way too simple, but that basically is the formula. There is an end to this suffering, which is the third noble truth, and the cause of that end is the following of the Eightfold Path. So, brilliant. I mean, the four noble truths are set up as a problem-solving formula anyway. There's a problem. The problem is caused by whatever it's caused by. We can end this problem, and we end the problem by following steps. So, very simple, very direct, and just like telling you that Zazen is sitting and following your breath sounds much more simple than it really is. Getting to the cushion every day and practicing and really being intimate with yourself on the cushion, not an easy thing to do. It requires a lot of work, a lot of focus, and some discipline to actually do that. So same thing with trying to resolve systemic, I'll just call it division, because it's not just racism. It's homophobia, transphobia, it's gender discrimination. All of those discriminations are in play. So how do we end divisiveness? And that end comes with really paying attention and really taking responsibility for what's happening in your environment as it comes up and addressing it in a way that's effective. So sometimes riots are effective, sometimes they're not. Sometimes, standing on the soapbox and delivering, this harrowing speech about the damages of all this divisiveness is effective. Sometimes just pulling someone aside and saying, hey, can we find a better way to do this is a more effective way to do that. There's an endless variety. Everything is not a nail, and we are not just hammers. So finding what works in each situation is the nuance of the practice. She gives some very clear directions in part of her book, which I've listened to. I've listened to all of 2 chapters, so I know nothing about her book. So at this point, those are the 2 chapters I listened to, but she sounds very good. I will be continuing to, will buy the book because it's worth reading and making notes and doing all those things. If you haven't bought the book, by all means do that. But it is available on Audible and easier to access that way. But I just really wanted to, for me, um, I've actually been, had the privilege of being trained to address and to investigate and address and respond to claims of discrimination. Now, admittedly, my response to claims of discrimination had nothing to do with the discrimination itself. It had to do with limiting liability for the organization that I worked with, because that's really the only reason HR exists. They're not there to help you. They're there to make sure you don't sue us. So this, sorry to disappoint you if you had some other idea about HR. They do provide a study, but it's a viable service, but it's not what most people think it is. So those responses are with that bias in mind. It's really about, does the situation create a level of liability for the organization, and how do we respond to that? They for the caretaking of the people who are involved, because that's the more important piece, because people get harmed in that situation. Someone has either actually been or is perceived that they have been discriminated against, and they are not feeling good about that. They're not feeling safe. They don't want to be at work, and when they are at work, it affects their ability to be productive. These types of divisions, racism, any kind of phobiaism, has devastating impacts on people's productivity and their ability to function. So there is direct harm that is caused by that, even if people think it's a joke, they think it's funny. There is karma attached to all of those types of actions. And that's what's difficult, probably the most difficult part to get across to people who perpetuate these types of things. Is certainly a lot of people don't intend, to cause harm, but they'll send my office, I was just joking. People can't take a joke. I'm going, well, people can take a joke when it's funny, but it's not funny, when you are attacking someone on some kind of, social level, and especially when you're talking about something that they have no control over. We have no control over how you were born, what skin color we are, all those things that, difficulty hearing me, sorry. All those things that, how we show up, our height, weight, gender, all those things, were handed to us, and how we were responding to the world is, dependent on everything that happened in the past. So we don't have a lot of control over what goes on, and to make a joke about that or make someone feel less than or separate from those things that they have no control over, and which are not less than and are different from anyway, is not funny. And that's the hard part to get across, because all humor, and certainly we not that I blame our stand-up comedians, the comedians provide a valuable service, because they're the one small group of people that is allowed to tell the truth about things that other people, you can't say out loud. However, to a certain extent, they can be, insensitive about who it is they are talking about when they're on stage. Emulating that in one-on-one or in the workplace, probably not a good idea. So it does cause harm. There is definitely an impact to people personally, to the workplace, to any organization in which this is happening. So these are the important things to address. And there's also a lot of deliberateness in why things look the way they look in the culture. When you walk into a room and the room is predominantly one color, there's a reason that's happening. That doesn't happen by accident, especially if you're in a city where there are all kinds of people, all kinds of diversity that has access, and they're not accessing. this particular space. Good idea to question that. What is causing that? And there are multiple causes, and not all those causes are good or bad or anything in between. So refrain from the judgment, but just look at it. Question it, and then question yourself. How, and I have to do this for myself as well. I There was a move. I was screening a movie for that Kaiser wanted to show, um, that talked about privilege. Not necessarily white privilege. It was really more socioeconomic privilege. It happened to be done. All the people in the movie happened to be white, unfortunately, because I don't think it was fair in that sense. But it was some kind of team, baseball team, football team. It's a football team thing. So he started asking these questions. So, how many of you have never had to worry about whether or not you're gonna have where your next meal is coming from? Take a step forward. So, how many people never had to worry about whether or not they were able to pay the phone bill? Take another step forward. So all these levels of privilege, of socioeconomic, have the ability to pay for all this stuff. Um, and so several of the people advanced, several of the people did not advance because they had known that, and there was a mix of who that was. Um, and I had to question myself. I'm going, I would have been in the front of that line because my parents worked very hard to make sure that my sister and I had everything we wanted and needed. So I come from that privileged background, not rich, but we had enough. I never had to worry about food, where the food was going to be on the table. We had healthcare, we had cars, we had all the usual stuff that a middle class family would have. So never had to worry about that. So I too had that privilege growing up. And how does that privilege, um, how is that privilege complicit with the divisions that are showing up in our world? How am I responsible for that? And how do I take that for granted? In my own being, in the world. So there are biases that come up, with that privilege. So it's a good idea to take a look at that, see where that is, because it doesn't always lie around racial lines. It really has more to do with, a lot of it has to do more with money. There are definitely some very clear systemic racial discriminatory practices that go on in this particular country. The redlining, that's the history is there. And it's well known. We currently have an administration that is in deep denial about that, and that too is something we need to take care of. And certainly, when it came to Mr. Kirk, I asked my sangha yesterday, if Mr. Kirk were in front of you, how would you take care of him? And I realized that no one was going to say it out loud. And I said, and I know that there's some people in this room that said I would kill him, because that is one response that people have, and certainly you just want to get rid of it. It's like this is a problem. Please get it out of my way, and so I can move on with my life. But unfortunately, he's just one of many people who holds these opinions and has no problem announcing them and living his life out of them. So you may kill that one hater, that one divisionist, but the divisions are still there. So the work doesn't end there. And I will be honest with you, when people have invited me to talk about race in Dharma talks, or I've been invited to start a BIPOC groups, I've been like, no, we did this work in the '60s, we're done. Why are we still doing this? I'm in denial. I prefer denial. It's much more comfortable than actually getting up and having to fight this good fight again. And I don't know that it has to be a fight. It is the reality of the world. The world, we've naturally evolved to be able to discern the differences between that which we feel safe with and that which we don't feel safe with. Certainly, it gets applied in bizarre and unnecessary ways, but that is a natural function. It is how there are now 8 billion of us because we're not walking into the path of a lion and becoming somebody's dinner. We know how to tell the difference. But now it's being applied where there really is no threat. I see this person, they look different from me, therefore, that person needs to not be there. But why? There's no rational reason for that to happen, or to have those beliefs. But those beliefs are still there because we attach this story to this natural impulse without reasoning it out. And that's where the suffering happens, is in the story. When we fail to take a pause and really question what it is we're feeling and what that means, and then attach some story to it, like, that person's unsafe, therefore, excuse me. I'll accuse Choa of giving me his cold, but that would not be true. You didn't give it to me. I've just had this dry throat for a while now. So taking that pause, as the precepts tell us, we cease from evil. That ceasing happens in Zazen. That is where we stop, where we really sit with who we really are and really get in touch with our essential nature. Our essential nature is whole and inclusive naturally. That happens without any effort. The fight is getting to that natural space, because billions and billions of dollars are being spent to distract you from getting to know your true self. You are the rebels who are being very, very countercultural by coming here and sitting in silence. The billionaires out there who are spending lots of money to keep you distracted don't want you doing this, because you will discover things that other people will not. That you can stop, that you can make a rational decision, you can actually be with difficulties and ambiguities and really have that work out within yourself before you go out into the world. That is not normal. You are not normal in that respect. You are the radicals who are actually doing a practice that allows you to stop this level of division from manifesting in the world. So thank you for doing that. Number one, hard work, and deeply appreciated from all of us. And we need to continue to support the centers that give us the space to do that, because having this kind of space is also rare, not always easy to find. So here we are with this practice, in touch with our natural, our true way, our true being, which we are perfect, whole, complete, and naturally inclusive, just within our being. And those of you who've sat for 5 minutes have felt it. You know it. You trust it, and you come back and do this work, no matter how hard it is. Continue to trust that, and continue to deepen that, and continue to operate out of that natural sense of being, that natural sense of wholeness and inclusion, because that is what, and I do believe, I take on faith when the Buddha said all beings have the wisdom of the Tathagata. All beings. He leaves nothing out. No one, no being, no animal, nothing is left out of that. All beings have the wisdom. But we don't realize it because of our inverted ways of thinking. So we can access it ourselves, and we can help other people access it. But that's the work. There are people who don't want to access it, and that's a choice they're making. But they all have that. They all have it, despite the fact that they choose to act in other ways. But I think that, and this is my theory, that part of the reason that they need to make so much noise about these divisions is because it's difficult to maintain that, because it's not the natural way for people to be. I mean, the loudest noise of division is the atomic bomb. I mean, that's the ultimate division. So if people would just stop uh, and be quiet and be in touch with their natural way of being, um, I don't know that it would completely end it, but it would definitely create the space for people to question what it is, how it is they're behaving, what it is they're doing, how it is they're living in the world. So these levels of division are also present within us. We also need to take responsibility for that. We're not separate from those levels of division that we decry, that we rail against. How do we take care of that within ourselves? How do we take responsibility for that? And how do we really own that? Because that's the only space in which we have agency to make choice. And that is really acknowledging, yeah, one possible answer to Mr. Kirk is a couple bullets. I felt it. And then I was like, wow, that's not how I want to be in the world. But they came up, to be honest. Um, so here we are with the work in front of us, manifesting in our current administration, manifesting in our neighborhoods, manifesting perhaps with people that you know personally, um, and certainly manifesting on the world stage. So there's a lot, or there's a lot to do. We can only do what we can do. So it's like, what's the old axiom? Think globally, act locally. Take care of what you can. Changing the world and creating world peace might be a bit much to try and do, but it's with one act at a time, one zazen period at a time, one moment of just saying, "Hey, that didn't work very well. Can we try this another way?" Calling it out, being attentive to it, evoking it as much compassion as you can. Not always easy to do, but as much as you can in every moment that you can, and really taking care of it, starting with yourself, because you put your own oxygen mask on first if you are to assist others to breathe. You have to be in a good space, in a good place to be able to address this. You have to own your own levels of divisiveness in order to address the divisiveness that you're seeing out there in the world. So that's the challenge. This is the talk I did not want to give, because I don't like talking about these things. I want it all fixed, and I want someone else to do it. But it's our job. It's all of our jobs. It's the vow we take for this practice to save all sentient beings, to end suffering. So yeah, when I put on this robe, I said, yeah, I would do that.